All right. Well, good to have this amazing panel here. We're going to talk, as we were saying, about scaling businesses in Central and Eastern Europe, in the region. We have two very different experiences here. Paulina will introduce herself in a second, but she's more on the legal side. She helps a lot of these transactions happen. And Andre has been more on the venture side. They'll introduce themselves in a second. But really the way we want to run the conversation is by covering really three things. So the first thing is, how does it, what do you need to scale a company? How do you go from startup stage to scale up stage? The second one is, how do we take those companies regional? And there's a lot of talk about creating regional champions, European champions. So how do we think about that as a group? And then the third one is talking a little bit more about the inorganic piece of things, because at the end of the day, all entrepreneurs want to grow their company to be successful and exit. And that's also a way to scale and become even bigger, which is thinking about exit. So we're going to try and talk about those three things, again, through our amazing panel. I'll let them introduce themselves first.
Thank you very much for this very warm introduction. Hello again, I'm Paulina Opiełka. As mentioned, I work as a counsel and advisor for different deals for scale-ups and investors in the CEE region. We work mainly in Poland, but we also see the development of companies from other neighboring countries, from the Baltics, from Ukraine, from the southern part of Europe. And we really do see that the need of scaling up is something that all those companies strive to do, and the challenges that they face sometimes are very unique. So I guess that we'll be able to really name some of those challenges and think how we can deal with them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Andre.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Andre. I'm a founder of Ventures Capital, the VC fund from 2001 that primarily focuses on the Ukrainian founders that scale their business globally, mainly in the US. So they know we have a big experience in terms of helping them to scale in the global markets. Also, I'm the chairman of Ukrainian Venture Capital Private Equity Association, which has 50 members that been investing in the Ukraine, and they're now also helping the Ukrainian founders to go through these difficult times and the scale as we speak.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to start talking a little bit about the journey from startup to scale up. And we're going to start by a very basic question. What are you, in your opinion, what are the challenges in scaling a company in the CEE region?
I think that first, one of the biggest challenges is that this is such a changing area and changing times. Like each year, the challenge would be different. From my perspective, we do see a lot of challenges in legislation, for example, which is really developing each year. You might expect a different approach that might need for you to adapt how you work. But also, the specific challenge is that this area, in my experience and how we see the deals being done, is a little bit more strict, a little bit more conservative maybe than the practices that can be seen, for example, in the US and the UK market. So we see a lot of this kind of clashes when the interests of investors or clients who are used to a different type of relationship are meeting with the scale-ups who just did the business differently on their level. So building that trust, this is also a specific challenge that requires work, and it's definitely possible because the development of approach of scale-ups to their clients, to their investors is really, really visible. It's really changing. We are leaving behind a lot of those like past ideas that the deal has to be like written in blood and signed, and that's like the holy paper that you hold. Now it's much more based on trust. So I think that this might be one of the specific challenges.
And I'm going to stay with you for a second, Paulina. So those are the challenges. How would you recommend to startups to prepare their scaling process? What are the special, maybe initiatives they should take, or the the pillars they should build for their business to be more successful at that scaling up?
I think that firstly they have to plan like really, really upfront, not to think about it when they reach the scale-up phase, but actually when they start already working on their business, when they are checking the concept that they have, when they are working on their MVP. This is already the moment that they have to think about scaling up, because if they make any mistakes on that level, or if they go to a different direction that would be then recommended, they'll just have to backtrack and do it over again. So, for example, building the cost models already on an early stage, being aware how you generate revenue, how to maximize the revenue, how to repeat it. This is something that you should think about already on an early stage of your development, because later on, this is something that your investors would like to see. They would like to check that and verify, and might be a little bit too late if you think about it on that stage. Also, this proof of concept phase, really checking the product market fit, this is something that we usually focus during the seed stage of the investment. And I see a lot of excitement in the founders that when they see that this works, they really want to go forward because this is really, really a good idea. But sometimes going this extra mile, spending this extra half a year just working on it and really verifying if this is this golden thing that we want to present to the market, might really then pay up in the future. So planning, really, this is as easy as it is, but this is the key to the success.
Yeah, planning is always a great piece of advice. So Andrei, you have a career that has spanned, in the US, so you have a lot of experience working with business in the US, building your own businesses. Obviously, you have an amazing visibility on the Ukrainian sector, so you know probably every single company over there. If you were to draw some of the experiences and conclusions from your successes in the US and apply that to what would you say? What are the recommendations you would bring?
Well, we are focusing only on the Ukrainian founders. And we invest in the people, and because we are first investors in the majority of the cases, it's a first-time experience for them. So the biggest challenges they're always, let's say, team dynamics and the psychological ones, in terms of how to build the business. And building businesses, it's a skill set. The question is how to fail fast, as we say in Silicon Valley, and how to do the pivots, how to be able focusing on the main thing, which is the product and the customers, because the rest is applies. But and I believe that the Ukrainian founders already learned it, because as we talked before, we already have 7 unicorns just for the last 7 years, and that because also they share in the culture. And that's very important because majority of our founders, they've physically been relocated in the US to pick up that culture and also to give back to the community, because we encourage them to share their practical experience. It's something you cannot do through MBA or read in the books. By practical experience, how to build the company, how to sell, how to the market fit, product fit, etc., etc., etc. So it comes naturally alongside or within the Ukrainian tech community because of this knowledge sharing. And also because this is people that have been on the first front, and they've been doing that in US. And this is how we are together becoming stronger by sharing that experience, which is, once again, it's a purely psychological one, because we are investing in the marathons, not only in the sprints, in sprinters, as you know, right? They do sprints, but the many of those are having hard time to do the long run. And of course, it takes up to 10 years to build great companies. So it's all about the people and how we can actually help them go faster to get this experience, but it's all about the actual experience that you can have. So there is no general things. It's always pretty much focused on the do it, fail, learn, do it again. Pretty much like this.
Now that's
entrepreneur-like, of course, but that's all we invest in.
No, I mean that's a good answer, because actually I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I think I'm a London-based investor. We invest in the US, we invest in Europe, and over the past few years, we've been discussing it earlier. We've seen an amazing emergence of Eastern European talent in London, whether it's on the founder side, on the technical side, of course. And this whole concept of giving back is really what has built the Silicon Valley ecosystem, the New York ecosystem, and increasingly some of the ecosystems that are more buoyant is really these entrepreneurs who've been successful, who come back and then kind of teach their own ecosystem on how to do things right or how to avoid some of the mistakes. I'm glad you brought that point. And definitely, former entrepreneurs should be a great agent for change, right, in any ecosystem.
Right, and just one quick advice, because this versus to this, some of the European startups that we see, the Ukrainian startups, they focus on the global market day one, because this is their mindset. So they're not afraid to actually experiment, because they already have that kind of knowledge from the other ones that failed, but been successful, and so on and so on. So we have many role models, but it's very important. So you focus on exactly on the global market. You're not afraid. You just go there and do it. It's simple as that.
No, that's right. Paulina, on your side, you're exposed to a lot of different agents that are part of the ecosystem of innovation, right? What about governments? I mean, there's this whole discourse from a number of governments that they want to have local unicorns, local big companies to bring innovation into the ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. How are you seeing governments helping innovation in a way that allows companies to scale up in the region?
Well, definitely there is some practice on that. So it's not only talk, but also doing. That is a very positive aspect. For some time here in Poland, we had a lot of programs, they are still running, that were focused on young entrepreneurs in seed or pre-seed stages that wanted to gather funding. Those were publicly funded projects, quite easily accessible in terms of getting there, not quite easily manageable in terms of running those projects. At the moment, there is a special focus on attracting foreign investment and foreign companies to Poland. So again, there are some programs. One is called Poland Prize. It's been started last year. It's quite popular right now. This allows for startups from abroad to actually move into Poland and open up their businesses there, gain the exposure in here. So the support from government is there. I would have to say that the level of funding available is rather small. So whatever you need, you definitely need to also gather investment from the market. But for this first round for warming up your engines, then the funding is available. And the second positive aspect is that, as I was mentioning before, that there are those changes of legislation. It's very hard to follow them. And some of those changes are not that friendly as we would need. But a lot of them are also focused on how to make technology more available and more affordable to people. So there are a lot of benefits, for example, in taxes in Poland that really allow for development of new technologies of software. So the environment is changing. There are those like special zones, for example, or special spaces where you can use a fund or you can use a benefit and just try to get going. But when you are warmed up, then this is really up to you how you manage.
And Andrei, from your perspective, from the association, how are you guys helping also startups? Just go.
Well, first things, we have built the industry with zero the government money. So even our funds, they don't have institutional investors. So basically, our funds, they are run by former entrepreneurs that done the cash out or the exits, and they just been deploying the same capital. So it's very important to understand that we do have. Well, as association from 2015, we've been working on the fund the funds project, basically to let the first-time managers to have access to the institutional capital. And luckily, after 6 years, we were successful in January to start this program. It's still going to continue as we speak. But currently, our focus is on those startups that are stayed in Ukraine and will be in Ukraine till the victory. It's very important because the 99% of our startup, they are stayed in Ukraine. And we are deploying now a few programs. One of those is called Support Ukrainian Startups now. By the way, everybody is welcome to join. It's a hybrid the program for the grants, for in-kind of services, different ones that startup would pay for. So basically, it's a bridge to financing, like the commercial one. And also, you are welcome to invest in those as well. But of course, the program is focusing on those who have essential needs right now. And this is why we are all team up, because in our association is 50 members, not only but 50 members, but in Ukrainian ecosystem, overall there are 200 the international funds that have been investing. And of course, they also understand now, alongside with the IT corporations, that helping fellow tech founders that having hard time to keep their families and the enterprises alive is going to be very important for now, for the industry, and everybody welcome to actually with us, because we already been doing this. We already done 2 badges. All of them on the uvca.eu website, so just everyone is welcome just to go there to see what we've been doing it, and just welcome to catch me here to discuss what we can do together for now, and also to continue to grow our industry, which has a lot of results.
Very good. You mentioned the number of funds that are investing in Ukraine, but I guess there's this general commentary on how scarce growth capital is across the region. What's your experience with that?
Well, with the growth funds, the situation is very simple. We have the 2 PE funds that do round B, and but if you look at the Ukrainian startup, that you will see the round B is already happening in US. Okay, from General Catalyst to all our unicorns or decorns, you will see them that they skipped the Series A in Ukraine, and then they're just gone because they're already there. So basically, I would say we don't have that problem, because the good ones they're receiving the funding and around B, C, and etc. But what's more important is, I would say, the seed funding, because obviously we didn't have the proper infrastructure before, but it changed in the previous years. So, but the round B it's mainly international. Yes, we do have experience with 5 deals together with the PE funds. We attracted the Soros Private Equity Fund in 2015, by the way, after the war started. But they made the biggest investment in a Ukrainian company named Cyclone with 3,000 people. And that was a wake-up call for the whole PE industry in New York, and many follows, because they saw that they're on the ground, they are not visible because they're all private company, of course. And all of a sudden now we have an ecosystem, more than 50 company with valuation from 50 mil to $1 billion. And all of a sudden it's all private. So, but read our reports, because we have a ventures deal book, we have UVC annual reviews, and we will see all the deals we track from 2014. It's all there. And also you can go on the Crunch base to see it, but it's all there in all our reports. Please join.
No, I mean, but it's still a shame to see that, unfortunately, a lot of European companies, Eastern European, Western European, Southern European, need to leave their country to be able to access those bigger funds and reestablish in the US, and things like that, right?
True. That's why our fund of funds is exactly for that, because you need to still have a capability for the institutional ones to come in early. Yes, we have the 2 deals from the EBRD Technology Fund, but they can tell you that they have a hard time to compete with round B funds, and we all know why, right? So that's why the deal flow is there. Absolutely, but it's very hard to compete with the more entrepreneur-like funds. So it's all about how to get the institutional investments together with the local funds on the ground. They've been doing this because, as I said, they're all previous tech entrepreneurs. It's a different mentality, and they have different scope of operations, and they're very fast in the closing deals, in chasing deals, and so on and so on.
One question you indirectly brought, and maybe from Paulina, related to talent. I mean, we seem to be now in a total war for talent across all of Europe, across the world, right? I mean, with COVID, where at the end of the day, the way people used to work has kind of changed to the point where it doesn't really matter where you are. We're seeing a lot of attraction of Eastern European talent. So how do you guys see, from your own vantage point, the war for talent affecting the ability for companies to scale up in the region?
I think this is a very big factor in the scaling up process, because in the very beginning, what is attractive in the company, of course, it's the team. The team is always the core of the company, but it's also the product, the technology that they have. But once they are growing, they are really on a hunt for talent. And the biggest acquisitions that we are working on recently were directed to that. Those were mostly acquisitions for talents. We're looking for people who can actually help develop the product, help develop the service. And since we are living in a COVID or post-COVID world, the hunt for talent internationally, it's much easier because, of course, as we know, the way how we work changed. We don't have to sit in the same space. We can be really spread out all around the globe. And then the factor of where we can find this talent is actually affecting how the scale up is going to grow. So there are even sometimes very not obvious ways for development. Like recently we were speaking, like the US market is the one that's really attractive, and of course it's still the direction that a lot of companies go. But suddenly you can see scale up going to absolutely different direction, reaching to companies and trying to get bigger in very less obvious directions, only because there is this talent there that they want to acquire and then they want to work with, and it's possible right now. So definitely an important factor. Also, I think changing a little bit how we approach the entire scaling up process, the process of acquisitions, because we do not have to follow the same rules, the rules that some, for example, US funds that are used to a certain way of living, working would propose, then it's getting to be a much more creative work. So less rules, more imagination, let's say, in that case.
That's a good way. So in terms of factors helping companies scale up, we've talked about talent, we've talked about former entrepreneurs giving back, we've talked about capital, the need for maybe more later stage capital, but then the availability also of early stage capital and also the help from governments. In your experience, something that has gone wrong, right? Let's talk about the wrongs. Something where you may have encountered a company and they thought that to scale they needed to do that and it was totally the wrong idea or the wrong process. What can you bring from your experience?
You want to go first on this one?
Okay, I can start. I can start first. Well, we have just give you example on one company because it's called PetCube. PetCube, they open up the category of the connected pets gadgets in the US, and the sales were enormous. It was a long line, but guess what? For 5 years, the company could not get the financing for the productions, being a US company. So for us, it was a wake-up call because you on the old US stores, you have inventory, you have everything, but you have this bridge financing coming from the US bank. So for us, it was the biggest bottleneck for this company. Well, the company is still growing, but what I'm saying, that could be the unicorn easily if that would be the instruments that could actually bridge mezzanine investments or the so-called trade investments. Not happening. Not happening because they have own restriction as this, especially with China, etc. So all of a sudden they have a great company, but guess what? You cannot do the every half of the year 10 million rounds cash in, right, for the equity, because otherwise it doesn't make sense for the founders either. So this is one of the things for, and you have other challenge being in the hardware business on top of it. So it's one of the things. I understand that your question was about more kind of learning mistakes and so on and so on, right? But look, every startup has their own mistakes, right? So it depends on where they do. Of course, there are some common things, but probably the biggest mistakes are about defocusing or defocusing from our experience. So we've been working very hard. Forget about the everything except one thing. The product and the client. That's it, nothing else. It's narrow, but it's very wide, okay? Because many startups with investors doing a lot of things, and so on, but in the end of the day, it's all about, do you have a client or not? And in terms of how you win the war, in terms of the competition with the other guys. That's all it cares. But it sounds simple, but in reality, to build your business process to be ready for that hockey stick moment that we all are waiting for as investors, but it takes a lot of background job to focus on exactly what I say. So the focus is a tremendous problem, and of course, as I said, to build a company is a skill set, but it takes the lifetime experience, and of course we as investors a lot to push through this in order to get this guy to the next level. Being an entrepreneur ourselves, of course we are sharing this, we've been through this, but when you see it, when the guy is a first-time founder, how to get from A to B, that's a different thing. It's a life. I mean, life, and by the way, that's why I have a joke, why the venture capital is so expensive, because it involves many psychological services, pro bono, a lot, right? Or coaching services for the same reason.
So I will be maybe a little bit on more positive note, because this is not a success story. Yeah, of course. But what I want to say that this story ends happily. This one, a scale up that. Of course, what you mentioned, focusing on the product, focusing on the customers is absolutely the core of the business. But also, as we were discussing the team, gathering the appropriate people for appropriate stages of business. And we had a chance to work with a scale-up who had a very good deep tech product, gathered a lot of interest from investors both in Poland and abroad. They were moving to US. They already moved to US right now, so that's where the success story is. Spoiler alert. However, the challenge that they had is that they were just missing those people who would allow them to connect with the key customers that would be actually the beneficiaries of their product. So the idea was there, the product market fit was there, the idea how to commercialize was there, but there was just they were not in touch with those people who they wanted to sell in. So it was really much on the verge of not working out. Luckily, in the end, they managed to complement their team with people who were able to provide that kind of experience with also some equity. So that helped. That's always very attractive. So this element of team building there turned out to be the crucial for scaling up. Without that, there would just be, hopefully not a failure, but at least the process will be prolonged.
Yeah, I guess it's part of the learnings. I mean, at the end of the day, I think each entrepreneurial journey is different. And, entrepreneurs, what I tell the companies in my portfolio is, to take their journey as a blank canvas and then to just learn as much as they can, but to make every decision their own and just, build on top of that and kind of own their own destiny and think about it in their own ways, right? So a lot of what you said, both of you, makes a lot of sense in that regard. So, all right, so I think we have all the elements to have a successful scale-up now. So we're good. Now we know, the book of secret has been opened for everyone.
It's very easy, right? Like just the 3 elements and you can go.
It just grows like with the rain. Now let's talk a little bit more about the region. So I'm newer to the region, and on the other side, the region has been getting a lot of attention over the past few years, months. Also with some countries that people were not necessarily expecting, bringing great companies to the market, and there's a little bit of of an Eastern European frenzy in the good sense of the term in the venture community. So help me read a little bit the dynamics of the region. Poland, the Baltics, the non-European Eastern Europe, Southern Eastern Europe. Help me read a little bit the dynamics and how you see how innovation flows and how these more pluri-countries, so to say, scale-ups organizing and succeeding.
I think that we really felt recently, the recent 10, 15 years, that we actually here in the region can develop technology, and you do not have to move somewhere else to do that. There really are resources here and knowledge here and people here who can do that. And then also we learned that developing technology might really depend mostly on the people who have around. So this might have encouraged this huge development of innovation in the region. Then the aspect that we discussed, that the legislation and the processes also became more friendly, founder friendly. This also encourages this development. But in terms of technology, in terms of the ideas, I think that here sometimes in this region you can find much more novelty than you would find in some countries that used to have those fintech technologies or other types of solutions for a long time. Like we were discussing today that here in Poland and Ukraine, the online banking or payments are much more developed than they are in different countries around the world. And this is mostly because we had this, freedom to actually focus on that, and a lot of positive thinking and a lot of excitement about focusing on these technologies, also on the side of customers. So suddenly we see in the region that this works very well. Like Estonia, for example, is a pioneer in developing different new technologies here. We do not have to introduce the scale-ups that are coming from there. I think they are pretty known for everyone. So it turns out that this works, and I think that this is what it's attracting investors right now, because they already had their kind of proof of concept that this region can actually produce something interesting, and now that we can go in here and work on that.
Andrei.
Well, the reason why we're in Ukraine for 22 years, that's exactly because of the talent, the expertise, and the question is how to actually teach them to use or leverage the technological skill set, because you see even the not Ukrainians unicorns, but with the Ukrainian CTO there, and of course everybody knows about Max Levchin or the Jan Kum, because they've all been CTOs. But it's about how to actually build the companies and the products. And for what we see for last 6-7 years, it's been a huge shift from the technology expertise. Obviously it's there, it's 260,000 the engineers, because of the historical background, and because Ukraine not only grain but also brain basket for all the regions, because of the Cybernetics Institute and so on and so on. But this historical background. The question is how to leverage this technical and technology skill in order to build the good products. And all of a sudden, because of our inclusion in the US ecosystem, the people got the skill set and the knowledge how to build the great products. And here, by the way, one of the representative, one of those is Better Me. It's one of the top application of the sport, but the holdings have been behind it, been doing the apps on App Store. You don't know they're Ukrainian, but they are. So all of a sudden, we have learned how to build the great products, okay? And that happened just recently because of the inclusion, right, to the different ecosystem, because of the VCs that have been invested in the Ukrainian ecosystem alongside with us, because as you remember, we are first investor, but then we are raised from the yes investment. So all of this created this ecosystem. When you actually match, that's why the Ukraine is referred to very often to the Israel ecosystem, pretty much the same, not just because of the Ukrainian engineers, historical ones, but also how they manage entrepreneurship and the technology background, and how to learn how to build the fast products and how to scale it up fast, and mainly in US markets. So it's all the main pillars, and this is the reason why the talents are there, it's still going to be there, and this is why we are doing it. It's all about, look, we don't invest in companies and startups. We want to invest in the people, meaning their capability to build the global companies out of the technology skill set. It's very like that, very short.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, building on that point, and maybe a slightly different question there, but do you feel that some of the smaller countries in the region are maybe at a disadvantage, or on the contrary, they're not? I'm thinking places like Slovenia or Estonia, which are small internal markets, but then they happen to be very innovative.
Exactly, they do.
And so is it a disadvantage to have a small market, or is it an advantage that you need to go global right away?
Look, nobody has, including Israel and Ukraine, the local markets, except the e-commerce in the Ukrainian case. The rest is global. None of the country has a ability to scale it up because of the local market. So, sorry, maybe I don't know about the something Germany or the France or UK, but it's all global. We are in a global play. So that means that, yeah, you can use the local market for the pilots, but not to scale the business, okay? And usually the knowledge from the local market, you cannot apply for the customers in the global market. So it also doesn't help a lot. So basically, that's what I said. The mindset of Ukrainian entrepreneurs, they want go global, meaning US. As simple as that. You just don't waste your time on anything, but build the product, get there, sell. That's it.
That's a great.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to add that apart from what you said, there's also a very strong network, I think, of an ecosystem of scale-ups and investors that is really more CEE than one country. So this is very common to have Latvian startup moving to Poland, for example, or gathering Polish investors. The same with Czech Republic, with Slovakia. So I would not count the smaller countries in the region really as a separate country. I think that we can really treat all of those countries as one region, but with the global aspirations, of course. Mm-hmm.
So that's a call for the audience on the other side of the screen to the Western VCs. Come to the region. There's no such thing as a small country. There's just great talent.
Well, that's the reason why I'm speaking now on our association, right? Ukraine Venture Capital Private Association. We have a many Silicon Valley VC, and the reason why they join our association, they say we want to invest beforehand. They come to Silicon Valley. It's very simple, rational. They want to see the origination and the startups before they come there to be first. So it's very pragmatic, and that's why they're there already.
No, makes sense. VCs are always, that's VCs. If we were to take a little bit of an industry view on this, which industry do you guys think are particularly well suited in the region to create global players, to create regional players?
Well, we are sector agnostic. We have only one vertical, which is the founders, and because we cover in the Ukraine per se. But I would say something related, like we exited from the company in the just last month in January. We invested 9 years ago. That was augmented reality. Okay, why augmented reality? At that time it was computer vision because it's a background technologies that have been developed, etc., etc. So basically, there's something, and now it's a blockchain, right? In the sense of the technology, and so on, so on. So I would not kind of eliminate, right? Because when I say technology, what's artificial intelligence? Okay, it's everywhere. The question is how you deploy it, right? So the technology is in Ukraine. The question of how you build the cases, the products based on these technologies. Of course, we know all the promises verticals. I don't want to put it here, right? It's just about how you use this talent in order to build the products in the different niches or different verticals. That's it.
Paulina, what do you see? Which industries do you see come through your office most?
Yeah, I will have to be a bit more biased here because I can comment on what we see. It's definitely fintech that is like ruling the transactions and investments that we see. I think that mostly due to the reasons that we already discussed, that this is already on very advanced level, so there's only one way, and this is a way forward. And it's quite easy to expand because this is so attractive when you see those new fintech solutions that you can quite easily sell them abroad, sell them to the US, sell them to Asia. So a lot of potential there. But I would also think that medtech is there. There's really like they're on the spotlight. Now it's a time when a lot of technologies related to health are being explored more and more. And we also see some very interesting cases here in the region that are on the level of development. I really keep fingers crossed for the founders as I see them as well. Maybe I hope they are going to be unicorns, but they're definitely going to be good scale-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just small addition. Well, we talk verticals. Of course, there are kind of common folks, like for example the security ones, so different ones, and it's one of those that I would say even now it's heavily used because in the Ukrainian IT army there are 300,000 people, and they have a skill set every day. Mm-hmm. Well, for that reason, but this is how they find in the new expertise to build the better products. Of course, even our portfolio have 2 ones, but there are going to be many more from the dual use, from information and the security sectors for sure.
And those are definitely the industries of the future. We're seeing in an earlier panel the expected growth of medtech over the next few years at 20% year on year, and cyber security at large. I mean, all those are definitely the sectors that are going to drive a lot of the growth in technology in the future. So definitely, very encouraging for the region. I wanted to ask you about a little bit of a common myth that that I hear from some companies about the U.S., right, and whether to make it. To be a big company, you need to launch commercially in the U.S. And I think that's a big debate in the VC community because there's not a lot of history of European companies being all that successful at launching in the U.S. and kind of vice versa in a way, right? Paulina, you were alluding in your example before on how that company we're talking about that was establishing those relationships in the U.S. and how hard it is. What do you guys think is the U.S. in terms of the roadmap of growth? Is it a must? Is it a nice to be or nice to have? Is it case by case?
Well, the numbers don't lie, right? The U.S. is the biggest market, and the U.S. is an exit market. So we end the business not only to build the business, but also to sell the business. This is a reality for now. I'm not saying that the European market cannot cannot build the unicorns. But when you say the European unicorns, they will see their focus ones, right? Like from BlaBlaCar, Delivery Hero, and the many Glovo, and so on, so on. So they still focus on geographically on the local market, right? Per se. So from this standpoint, exit ones and the revenue-wise, etc., you have to be in US. Of course, the competition is high, but this is how the business is structured. And but once again, it's about the business model, right? If you're in B2B business, it's global for sure, right? Yeah. So it's pretty much. I don't like this debate because it's about like I don't like the generalized things because it's about like, okay, are we talking what vertical? Okay, this now where the conversation will be different from the total generalistic stuff.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more, really. This is not a really easy questions to answer whether you have to be there or you don't have to be there. Is that if you want to be there, you have to know why you want to be there. So as Andrei said, that if you are going to approach this group of customers that they're in the US, then definitely try to establish a business presence there. If you're looking for US investors, possibly they would prefer to be there. But this has to be an element of a strategy. Mm-hmm.
And also, and I tell you from our experience, we had two companies that we exited just last year. One is a Deposit Photos, it's like photo bank. And guess what? Yeah, they had the US a bit, but they've been good in the many other markets. And the other company is called Jubal, they're number one in 60 countries. Forget about US, yeah, because the US is already done, but they are second in the world because they are number one in the 60 other countries. So it depends your market where your clients are, and the company. With this company Jubal and Deposit Photos, they build the global businesses out of the Kyiv, Ukraine. So they don't even, well, they have some sales offices, but that means in some of the verticals, this is what I'm referring to, you can build the global business even not being there. So it's pretty much depends. Yeah, it's marketplaces, you could argue, but it's still possible to build not even focusing on US as a market, but it's still an internet in terms of the environment. Possible.
And maybe just to add out on that, US is this big market, but it's not the only market. And a lot of scale-up stories will actually not end up in the US, but for example, in Asia, like moved, for example, to Singapore. This is something that we see a lot in terms of technological companies because their product sells there very, very well. So again, element of strategy that you have and focus on a specific customer. This might be an American customer, but the final customer actually might be somewhere else and require you to move there.
I agree. I mean, I think at the end of the day, sometimes it's an entrepreneur's obsession to go to the US because they think that ups the quality of the company, which may not be the case because, to your point, it may not be the best decision or the most immediate decision at that point in their development. But both of you did mention that from an exit perspective, the US is still very, very important. So let's talk about exits for a second. Exits have been a little bit of an issue across Europe, and even if there's been a lot of activity in VC over the past 3-4 years, clearly the lack of exit is something that is hindering a little bit the recycling of money and kind of the giving back, not on the entrepreneur side, but more on the VC side. What are your perspectives on exits in the region for the next few years?
I think it really depends on the level of exit that we're talking about, because here a lot of scale-ups are still at the level that this is not going to be the final exit. This is just going to be one of many. So here space for that is much higher because there is usually an acquirer who just wants to buy the company, buy part of it, implement it into their own structure. And for that, I think there is still space. Like the bigger players are just buying the smaller ones. But in terms of the exit as a general, when we really get freedom for all the investors, I see the trend. It's very hard for me to judge where this is going to be, but this is one of those elements when actually, for example, entering a public listed market comes into play, and then we are discussing which public market is the most attractive, and then we'll just roll back to the US question, because at the moment still this is one of the most trustworthy ones. So if someone is doing an IPO in Warsaw Stock Exchange market, and if they are doing that in New York, that's going to be a very big difference. So I could see the attractiveness of going actually that direction just for the purpose of this final exit. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's also, this is what I see, right? Because obviously the public market is also in Europe, but I would say the US public companies, they're more risk-taking per se. They're more structured in terms of M&A, even they know not always successful ones, in comparison versus to the European ones, because the European ones also have access to the capital, right? Question, if you look at in the number of deals, or you can compare the data, you will see somehow they don't see the acquisition as a way to the scale up of their existing businesses. And I think it's a bit of the cultural-wise still, because of this, because to me, it would be obvious, I mean, you need the fresh blood, right? You need to acquire startups. That's why the US companies doing in order to scale their own business, to be competitive, because they know they will not build something by their own. That's the reason why they acquire, that's the reason why the VC business exists, right? Because we have exit. Who is buying it? right? That many the bigger companies buy small ones because it's cheaper for them. And then the other angle, which I believe already started happening in Europe, look at the now R&D spendings versus acquiring the startups. And this is where the magics come up. And of course, I believe this is probably a historical one because many, I'll say, many companies been spoiled by the European Commission money in terms of like, okay, we get the R&D, we don't need to innovate because we don't look at the. This is what I think. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in Europe, but I'm not European from this standpoint. But probably been affected for last months being in Brussels. It's a different universe there.
And so, talking about, as you were mentioning, international buyers coming into the region, I'm sure you run into a bunch of those transactions through, in your office. What are those buyers seeking? What are the things that that they like, and how can the companies here better prepare for those acquisitions ahead of them getting engaged in those transactions?
I would say that there are two things. One is the one that we really discussed a lot today, and one is the talent. And it's not only about the people that the company is hiring, but also the quality of the founders and then the managers that are running the company. I have not seen a good acquisition where the current management stays, whether there was no big trust built between the acquirer and the managers. So being those people that are trustworthy and being those people that the foreign investor will trust, that will still keep running the company, is one of the key factors that we see. And mostly the deals really run around that, how to make that happen, how to measure if the management is actually a good management, how to measure their success in delivering the results that they agree on. And the second element, I think, is making your company transparent. So it's really clear for the investor to see what they are buying. Of course, they want to check the company. They want to make their due diligence. They want to verify what kind of revenue they can expect. Is it repeatable or not? So for the scale up, it would be very important to keep their ledgers clear, being aware of how you generate business and how you measure that. Because in the end, those numbers will also speak to the investor and will allow them to compare and to make the final decision.
And more on the legal side, I would say, on the legal structuring side. This is a more technical question, but okay. Are there special features that you see in those transactions that are maybe useful for some of the entrepreneurs listening to know about?
Well, it's really coming to be more and more common to not focus on strict equity acquiring, so strict share deals or investment on equity, but different types of loans or notes that are convertible to equity, because this is something that is much more popular in Western Europe or in the US. So this is definitely something that the new investors will come and would expect legally to have here. So we are also switching. Like, for example, Polish legislation is not really prepared for that. We have to improvise, but this is doable. It just has to be worked a little bit more harder on. So we do not have safes, for example, here in Poland. I don't think we have them anywhere else in the region. This is something that a lot of investors would like to do, to just put the paper on the table and use it. We cannot really do that here. But we try to implement some replacements for that. But this is at least from the legal perspective, I think this is the direction and how the deals are getting structured. Another element that we also see quite often is a proposal to flip the business from European country somewhere else, somewhere where the investor would feel more comfortable having it, or when they are expecting to gather more revenue due to clientele. So a lot of share swaps, a lot of transformations to, for example, US market also are happening as a part of a structured deal.
No, that makes sense.
Well, if you look at the M&A, the question is what the acquirer is looking for. So we see the many acquiring deals just because the people want to actually acquire the talent and technology behind it, and they see the strategy how to use it for the company growth. As simple as that. For the bigger stage, or for the bigger companies, of course, they're looking for the clientele and the usual things. And also the question of integration is very important because the US company learned the lesson, right? So basically they try to keep them independent inside in order to continue them to innovate rather than and give them everything they need for that, rather than integrating that in the company itself and the corporate structures, because sometimes it's very different, let's say, agnostic or the controversial type of the cultures, and they know the majority of this failed because of this. So they're now setting up the structure. Okay, you're independent, but you work for us, because all they care in the end is the joint balance sheet, right? That's all what it matters in terms of the numbers. So, but we see the big number of the acqui-hiring type of deals, enormous. So all our portfolio building attacked for last 2 years. Okay, just we want to acquire. So thank you very much, but we are growing 100% a year. No reason. Just we'll buy us at the pre-IPO or IPO. So that's the mentality. But we see a lot of appetite to actually acquire the technology and the talent behind it. This is what they're hunting for in the end of the day. That's why we have exits in the industry.
All right, no, that's great. Well, I think we've covered pretty much all the questions we had, and we've covered a lot of the different aspects of scaling up a business in the region, anywhere from small to big, from big to regional, from regional to exit, hopefully. Any parting thoughts from our panelists today?
I would say that it's really important to be exposed to different regions, even if you're scaling up in CEE. Just take a look and see how it's going to happen somewhere else. Are there new opportunities somewhere else? Because sometimes scaling up means actually moving forward to a different direction. So that would be my general comment here. But how to do it? Those are the formalities that can be settled later on. Those are the smallest things. But just to having this vision and where you want to go forward and what scaling up really means to you, whether it's just growing up in one place or actually moving forward somewhere else, this might actually decide how the whole entire process will work.
Wise words. Andre, any parting thoughts?
Well, I'll be very short. Talk to me about the Ukrainian startups. We can do many things together now on many fronts, from the investments, helping and actually building the unicorn startup of Ukraine that we are still continue to do. And we are successful, so just join us in this journey.
Very good. Well, thank you both. Thanks so much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for your time and for the insightful discussion. Thank you.